Welcome to my channel Alien Signal. For nearly 4,000 years, the extinction of the Velcraft had been the greatest mystery in the history of the galaxy. Every advanced civilization knew their name. Ancient ruins across dozens of planets carried warnings carved into stone in hundreds of alien languages. Beware the Velcraft. The Velcraft were not merely predators. They were the apex hunters of entire ecosystems, towering, intelligent creatures capable of adapting to almost any environment. Fossil records showed that they could survive extreme heat, freezing temperatures, toxic atmospheres, and even low-gravity worlds. Their bodies were built for domination. 6 muscular limbs, a skeletal structure denser than titanium, eyes capable of seeing across multiple spectrums. And worst of all, they were smart. Ancient alien civilizations believed the Velcraft had once hunted entire intelligent species for sport. Thousands of years ago, early spacefaring societies encountered them on frontier planets. Entire colonies disappeared overnight. Cities were found abandoned, ships left intact but empty. It was as if something had systematically hunted the hunters. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared in historical records, the Velcraft vanished. No final battle, no evidence of disease, no evolutionary collapse. They simply stopped existing. The Galactic Academic Union had spent centuries studying the mystery. Entire universities were built around the question: what caused the extinction of the Velcraft? Scientists proposed hundreds of theories. Some believed a supernova radiation burst wiped them out. Others thought the Velcraft destroyed themselves in a hidden war. A few scholars even suggested an unknown galactic super predator hunted them to extinction. But none of the evidence ever supported those ideas. The truth remained hidden, until a day that no historian would ever forget. The Orion Interstellar Academy was one of the most prestigious learning institutions in the galaxy. Its classrooms were filled with students from over 50 different species. Tall crystalline beings from the Vega systems. 4-armed scholars from Tau Ceti. Small amphibious thinkers from aquatic moons. And among them sat a small, quiet human child named Eli Carter. Humans were still relatively new members of the Galactic Union. Compared to ancient civilizations that had traveled space for tens of thousands of years, humanity was considered young, sometimes even naive. Eli sat quietly in the back of Professor Thalrex's xenobiology class, listening as the tall, silver-skinned instructor projected a holographic image in the center of the room. The image slowly rotated in the air. A massive skeletal structure, 6 limbs, long predatory jaws filled with serrated teeth. The bones alone were taller than most students. Several alien students shifted nervously. Even as fossils, the Velcraft were intimidating. Professor Thalrex spoke in a calm voice. Today's topic, he announced, is the unexplained extinction of the Velcraft species. The hologram zoomed out, revealing ancient star maps filled with red markers. These markers represent confirmed Velcraft hunting territories roughly 20,000 years ago. The map was nearly covered in red. They were one of the most successful predator species ever recorded. Their range spanned over 72 inhabited systems. One of the students raised a tentacle-like limb. Yes, the professor asked. Professor, the student said, if the Velcraft were so powerful, what could possibly eliminate them? The professor sighed slightly. That, he replied, is the greatest unanswered question in galactic history. Another student spoke. Was it a war? No. Evidence. A virus. No biological trace. Climate change. They survived far worse conditions. The professor paused. For 4 millennia, our best scientists have failed to explain their extinction. The classroom fell quiet. Professor Thalrex turned toward the students. So I ask you a question. The hologram changed again. It now showed several reconstructed Velcraft hunting scenes. If you were a scientist studying this mystery, He said, "What hypothesis would you propose?" Hands rose across the room. A reptilian student suggested an asteroid impact chain reaction. Another proposed ecosystem collapse. One suggested the Velcrath evolved into a different form entirely. Professor Thalrex listened patiently, nodding at each idea. But none of them satisfied the known evidence. Finally, he noticed something. A small human hand slowly raised in the back row. Eli Carter. The professor smiled politely. "Yes, human student. What is your idea?" Eli hesitated. "Well, I might be wrong." "That is acceptable," the professor replied. "Science begins with wrong ideas." The class chuckled softly. Eli looked again at the holographic Velcrath skeleton. Then he asked a simple question. "Professor, how fast could they reproduce?" The professor blinked. "That is an unusual question." He checked his datapad. Based on fossil population models, Velcrath likely reproduced slowly. Perhaps one offspring every several years. Eli nodded slowly. "And they were apex predators, right?" "Yes. So, they ate other animals." "Correct." Eli leaned forward slightly. "And those animals had to reproduce faster than them, or they'd run out of food." Several students glanced at each other. Professor Thalrex crossed his arms. "That is generally how ecosystems function." Eli continued. "So if Velcrath were too successful, wouldn't they eventually hunt all their prey?" The room grew quieter. A four-eyed alien student objected. "That would only cause local extinction, not the entire species." Eli shook his head. "But what if it happened everywhere?" The professor's expression changed slightly. Eli continued slowly. "They were the smartest predators, right?" "Yes. And they spread across 72 systems." "Yes. So maybe they were too good at surviving." Several students frowned. Eli pointed toward the star map. "What if they hunted every major prey species faster than ecosystems could recover?" The professor said nothing. Eli continued. "If they were strong enough to survive harsh environments, then they wouldn't die when ecosystems collapsed. But their food would." Now the room was completely silent. Eli spoke softly. "So eventually, there would be nothing left to eat." One of the students whispered. "They would starve." Eli nodded, but slowly, over thousands of years. Professor Thalrex's breathing slowed. Eli finished his thought. "They didn't go extinct because something killed them." He pointed at the Velcrath skeleton. "They went extinct because they were too successful as predators." The room was silent. Then the professor turned slowly toward the holographic star map. He zoomed in. Ancient ecological collapse records. Extinct herbivore species. Disappearing ecosystems. A terrifying pattern emerged. Every system where Velcrath lived showed mass prey extinction shortly before the predators vanished. The professor whispered quietly, "My stars." One of the alien students spoke nervously. "You mean, they destroyed their own food supply?" Eli shrugged slightly. "That happens on Earth sometimes." Every alien student turned toward him. "Earth?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, sometimes predators overhunt animals, and the population collapses." The professor stared at the star map again. "For 4,000 years, we searched for a weapon, a virus, a cosmic disaster." He slowly turned back to the class. And the answer was, basic ecology. Ending. Within months, Eli Carter's simple theory spread across the galactic scientific network. At first, many scholars dismissed it. The idea seemed almost too simple. How could the galaxy's most terrifying predator species die from something so ordinary? But then scientists began reanalyzing ancient data. Planetary fossil records, prey population models, climate timelines. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Prey species vanished first. Then ecosystem collapse followed. Finally, the Velcrath populations began to shrink. Over thousands of years, the predators slowly starved across system after system. The truth was undeniable. The Velcraft had not been defeated by a stronger enemy. They had been defeated by their own success. Within a year, the theory was officially accepted by the Galactic Academic Union. And in a quiet ceremony at Orion Interstellar Academy, Professor Thalrex addressed his class. History often assumes great mysteries require complex answers. He paused. But sometimes the universe operates by simple rules. The hologram of the Velcraft skeleton appeared again. For thousands of years, we searched for an external cause. He looked toward the back row. But a human child reminded us to examine the most basic principle of life. He spoke the final conclusion slowly. Every predator depends on its prey. The professor smiled slightly, and if a predator becomes too powerful, it eventually destroys the very system that sustains it. The classroom lights dimmed as the hologram faded. And somewhere in the archives of galactic history, the mystery of the Velcraft extinction was finally closed. Not with a war, not with a cosmic disaster, but with a quiet realization spoken by a small human voice in the back of a classroom. Sometimes the deadliest predators in the universe are defeated by the simplest laws of nature. And sometimes, it takes the curiosity of a child to remind the galaxy how those laws work. Thank you for listening. Subscribe for more cinematic science fiction stories.